The Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John by Michael Carrillo. What are the Synoptic Gospels? The Synoptic Gospels are the first three books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. What is synoptic? The first three books in the New Testament are referred to as Synoptic Gospels. They are three different texts viewed through the same vantage point or the same eye. Why are the Synoptic Gospels so important? The Synoptic Gospels are important because of the closeness of literary context. They are so close in context it could be considered perjury, but to scholars, this reinforced the historical factuality of Jesus and his ministry. They are also important due to the fact of the time that they were written. Mark was written about 55 AD, about 25 years after Jesus' death. Matthew was written about 58 AD, and Luke was written about 59 AD. Why is it important when the Synoptic Gospels were written? It is important when the Gospels were written because they were written in enough time to be considered recent memory. This means the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke were written in enough time to dispute if there were any inaccuracies or fabrications of Jesus and his ministry. The authors of the Gospels wrote down what was already being preached and shared orally. There was no dispute to the things written, so we can trust what is written is truth. Who wrote their Gospel first? It is widely accepted that Mark wrote first, and Matthew and Luke used his material as source. This is referred to as the Markan theory. This is accepted because of its contents. 90% of material in Mark can be found in the other two, Matthew and Luke. Not just material, but even exact or near exact phrasing of sentences or words spoken by Jesus. Coincidence? There are other theories that are discussed, but since the Markan theory is the most accepted, we will just touch on that one. So who were the authors of the Gospels? Let's take a look at them. Matthew, he was a disciple of Jesus, a tax collector, he was a Jew, and a first-hand witness of Jesus Christ. The Gospel of Matthew was written by a Jew for Jews. He makes the case that Jesus is the promised Messiah from the line of David, a new authoritative teacher like Moses, and that Jesus is God with us. Mark, aka John Mark, a disciple of Peter, wrote down the accounts of Peter, and he was kicked out of a missionary trip by the Apostle Paul. In the first half of the book, Mark explains who Jesus is. He makes plain that he believes Jesus is the Messiah. In the second half of the book, Mark explains how Jesus became the Messiah through Jesus' crucifixion and his resurrection. Luke, he was a disciple of Paul. He was a physician. He did extensive investigation into the story of Jesus, and his account of Jesus' birth is what we use at Christmas time. Luke opens his gospel by telling us about the birth of John the Baptist and Jesus. He then skips forward to tell about the baptisms of the people and Jesus by John the Baptist. Luke's gospel has more parables than any of the other gospels. Luke's gospel is intended to make the case that Jesus didn't come as a conquering king, but as a suffering servant. It stressed the upside-down kingdom of God. The Gospel of John. John, he was a disciple of Jesus, the disciple whom Jesus loved. He was boiled in oil but didn't die, exiled and died on the island of Patmos, and he wrote the book of Revelation. So why is John's gospel separate from the others? It was written about 90 AD, contains only 10% of Markan material, and it's 90% original, and is written from a different viewpoint. He wrote his gospel for the believers of Christ from a Hellenistic background. The infamous words, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God," came from this gospel. John made the case that Jesus was the Word incarnate, the Word among us. The tone of John is completely different than the rest. He gives more examples of Jesus' humanity and his divinity. Thank you for listening to the summary of the Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something you didn't already know. Thank you.